So for January 10th, we're talking about what you're actually responsible for. There's a lot of things that we were told in Christianity that we were responsible to do for God, for others, and a lot of times that meant putting ourselves on the back burner. But what are we actually really responsible for?
Hi, I'm Candy. I'm a hypnotherapist who's deconstructing from evangelical Christianity, and I know how mindset shapes our behavior. So, in this series, I'm going to share my daily reflections from 3 different devotionals. The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo, and that one's a little more spiritual, non religious. Also, Jesus Calling by Sarah Young, which is a very modern Christian approach. And My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers, which is a very classic Christian angle. My goal is to help you see how each one of these devotionals or these day books might shape your mindset a little differently. And if you're into that kind of reflection, please like and follow for more. Let's get started.
For January 10th in the Book of Awakening, it's all about your goal or your obligation is to simply be you, your authentic self. And he talks about how comparison will distort your perception of others because you don't really know what they're like, especially you think of social media. You see the very best days of people and you're comparing it to your very worst days sometimes. And it will erode your joy. Comparison is the thief of joy. That's a common saying, but it is true. And your authenticity will allow you to be more comfortable in your skin. And then you'll allow others to be comfortable in their skin. It will be a much more loving arrangement because comparison pulls you out of yourself to try to be like somebody else or to think that you're supposed to or measure yourself up against somebody else, which is not you. And if you are you, you're not easy to sway because you can kind of check in with yourself. Is this who I am? Is this what I want to do? And it makes you less easy to be controlled. In a lot of areas where control is the goal, like church sometimes religion, they don't want you to be like the herd. You want this herd mentality. Everybody thinks the same, acts the same. They do not want you to have that authenticity because it's hard to control groups like that. And what sometimes happens is because we have this innate sense to be known for who we are, sometimes when we start comparing, we're going to do some things like you'll see somebody become very arrogant. So puffing themselves up. So this is what pride really is. You know how in Christianity, they would say that pride was like a pride, being proud of yourself, or a pride parade. Pride is really arrogance. It's being puffed up without anything to back that up. Thinking you're better than everybody, thinking you're the best at something when you don't even have a clue what you're doing. Because quite frankly, usually someone who's the best at it has done a lot of hard work and they don't go around saying they're the best at it because they're not arrogant about it. Arrogance is a sign of you're not known because you're not being authentic. So it can show up as puffing yourself up to feel seen because you want to be. There's a very natural human desire to be known. And sometimes you might be a bully, and through judgment or competition, you might push somebody down, trying to make others smaller, or even just quiet contempt. Both of those come from the same place, just that desire to be known. When what we actually need isn't superiority, we don't need levels, we don't need sameness. We need compassion, not comparison. We need compassion for ourselves. And as you have compassion for yourself, you can have compassion for others. And then that compassion will allow creating a safe space for authenticity to emerge without defenses coming up. And by compassion, I mean, just let go of the judgment we hold on one another. Like, you're supposed to be this way. You're supposed to act this way. You're supposed to follow this. This is the mold you're supposed to fit. These are the roles you're supposed to play. So something you can practice to kind of help you with this is standing maybe in front of a mirror and just look at yourself and gently bring to mind someone that you tend to compare yourself with and see what arises. I mean, does it jealousy arise, insecurity, judgment, longing? Where does that resonate in your body? Where do you feel it? What happens? Do you feel like your muscles contract or things get smaller, more compressed? And then let that image soften and fade and look away for a second and then look back at yourself. Look in your eyes, look at your face, and ask yourself, who am I when I am not measuring myself? Who am I under all the things I was told to be? Just go as deep as you can or want to. And then just ask yourself, what would it look like if this was enough for today? Just what's in front of me is enough. And see if that doesn't begin to soften and expand the feeling rather than the contraction. Just stay there for a few breaths. You don't have to fix anything. We're just becoming aware. So in Jesus calling, it's all about trust. Trust is kind of this, trust in Jesus builds like spiritual equity. And it's like a treasure that you can withdraw from during, if you trust him with little things, when you get to the big things, the harder things to trust for, you'll have lots of little things to remind you how much you can trust him. And so it kind of stores up treasure in heaven. That's really the verse she used. By placing your trust in me, you're kind of building up this trust. And that's what keeps you in peace, in his peace, because you're trusting him. And the more you trust, the more power you'll receive to trust more. And I can see this being very comforting as a Christian, but then I have some questions as someone who's deconstructed. Like, trust should fall on the person who's being trusted. They should be trustworthy. You will naturally trust someone when they're trustworthy. But there are so many times that people pray for things and it doesn't happen. And then there's this loophole. Well, God, is mysterious. Lord works in mysterious ways, or God's ways are not our ways, or, he's either answered yes, no, or not now. Well, that's the answer to everything. Yes, no, or not now. So no matter what, and we can't know what he's answering, we just have to go, I guess it's no because he didn't do it. Or I guess it's at least not now because he hasn't done it yet. And it's only do we know when it's yes is when it actually comes to pass. And there's a lot of things that don't happen that we pray for. And I remember one time, this was early when I wasn't deconstructing or I didn't know anything about it, but I was starting to question my faith a little bit more or be a little more, I was very serious about it. And I lost this piece in the car to a seatbelt that we had. And I had a bunch of kids that I had taken and dropped off at a bowling alley. I had actually gone with them. And it was my kids and some other kids, some of their friends. And so a piece to our seatbelt had fallen somewhere. So we get back to the car and they can't buckle. One of them can't buckle themselves in. So I look everywhere for this piece and I cannot find it. And then, and I'm praying, God, help me find it. Then I just drive them home. One of them I think they doubled up in a seatbelt. We get home. They go inside. I go back out and look through the van. I'm looking for it and I'm begging God to show me. I drove back to the bowling alley, looked all over the ground, even though I had checked that before too. Nothing. Can't find it. Never found it. And this is coming from a person that my family would always ask me to pray for things because they would almost always find them. And the reason is I would get these hits. I don't know if it was like some sort of psychic thing or what. I would just have this kind of feeling where something was. Like one time I found some pairs of shoes that I was looking for. And I just had this feeling I needed to take my drawer out of my dresser and look on the floor underneath, and they were there. And that was so crazy. There's so many things. And a lot of my family, we have ADHD, so we lose things a lot. Anyways, so when it gets to this seatbelt thing, this is the first time I get no answer, nothing. And I had begged to find it. And it seems so simple. And I remember saying, like, God, are you even for real? And I had trusted God. I had trusted all this time. And then in this little moment, really, he couldn't show me where the seatbelt was. But I do think, as someone who is spiritual still, like that was a turning point for me. I still remember that story very vividly. I remember the feelings, the frustration, and just the doubt of whether he was real. Like I was like, that was such a simple thing, and he didn't do it. And so, that's just one thing where I had built up trust, and then in a little thing, he was not trustworthy, or that idea of God was not trustworthy. So in this, the way in the Jesus calling, it's kind of makes faith this account that you're expected to keep funded. You keep funding it instead of God, who owns everything. I mean, can't he keep it funded? And worry and doubt and fear, those are signs that your balance is low. And then this creates like this kind of comparison tool, which the Book of Awakening was saying don't get into. But I remember my mom constantly getting judged by my dad because she'd worry about something, and instead he'd be like, you just don't trust God. You don't trust God, which made her feel even crappier. And stuff like that. So he could feel arrogant and puffed up and feel righteous, his self-righteousness, and she would feel pushed down. So that comparison was garbage. And the burden is shifted to the believer, instead of trust, just growing from safety and consistency and the integrity of the person, lived experience and that my lived experience of being able to trust this being and him fulfilling it. So instead, it's just trust me is demanded in advance. And that's not smart, actually. So I would say learning to trust yourself, your own intuition, your discernment, that gets sidelined in favor of just proving that you are spiritually confident. So even if you don't trust, you have to pretend like you do, and you can trick. It's easy to pretend in Christianity, in my opinion. Interesting, because I have never heard that. So they're responsible to basically evangelize, open their eyes to the truth. But true salvation hasn't happened yet. That's not conversion. Conversion happens when they receive salvation from God, but it's on God. Like it's not a work that they do. It's nothing they do, but they have to actually receive it. So it really does sound like they do something, but he was kind of like, it's not it's basically free, because I know Christians like to say, it's the free gift of God, unworked for it. You don't do anything for it. But in this case, your eyes are open, but you have to receive something still. So, or else it's just on Christians to open people's eyes, and they're kind of saving them, because then God's going to convert them, all of them, eventually. You see what I'm saying? It's either on the Christians that are sharing the gospel, or it's on the person to open or to receive from God. It's not really on God. It's on people again. So salvation isn't unworked for. There is something you have to do. It's not free in this scenario. But also, once you're truly saved, then you need to give up your right to yourself, to Jesus. So the first thing you got to do is you got to be open enough to have your eyes open when a Christian tells you. Then you got to receive what God gives. I guess he can't just give it to you. You have to receive it. And they'll wrap that in language like free will. God doesn't, push himself on anyone, blah, blah, blah. But it's not anything you do. There's just this cognitive dissonance that's so frustrating. And then you got to relinquish any ownership of yourself to prove to others that it was real. So it's just this narrow view of what a spiritual awakening would look like. It's you can tell somebody's been through it, I guess, if you can identify that they're doing everything for God. They've given up everything for God. I know people have done that. And it's supposed to prove something. It doesn't look like a very appealing life, and maybe that's the point. But to me, that's, I mean, just cruel if God put us here and then demands us believe something that we cannot know for sure until we die, and then punishes us for eternity if we don't believe that thing that is not obvious, even though people will say it is obvious. It absolutely is not. There might be an argument for it's obvious that there's something bigger than us, but to know that it's the God of the Bible is not. That's not obvious. To know that there's a burning pit after we die that we'll be tortured in for eternity if we don't believe this is not obvious. So it's this stirs up just a lot of questions. Like, I mean, if I feel like something, like I'm giving up something, in a way, I felt like I gave up a lot when I deconstructed, an awful lot. I gave up my life. My old life was gone. And I gave up community, my friends, a lot of my family. I didn't want to, but I was following what seemed true to me, what actually made sense and answered a lot of my questions and actually made me more loving and kind, more open to different ways of living in the world. But in this framework, I would be considered not spiritually, not, I wouldn't have had a spiritual awakening because their only idea of a spiritual awakening is becoming a Christian, because I didn't give up my life to Jesus. But in a way, I gave up my life in order to follow the truth. So if Jesus is the truth, right? I mean, there's a scripture verse that says that. Then I did. I followed the truth and I gave up my life that I had. I lost my life and I found life. I found real life. Like I'm living much more freely. So that's my, that's the devotion for today. Each one giving you a way to live. One is about being authentic, being yourself. That's the book of awakening. The Jesus calling is about your job is to just trust Jesus, trust him so that you can build up that equity. And in the utmost for his highest, you're supposed to be willing to have your eyes open. And then once they're open, then you have to be willing to receive. And then once you have received from God, then you have to give up yourself. So there you go. Do with it what you will. Take what resonates and let go of the rest.
Remember, you get to decide what you devote your thinking to today. You might not be able to control every thought that comes in, but you can definitely decide what you entertain. And whether it comes from something I've said today or something completely different, choose wisely and set an intention that truly benefits you and those around you. And if you found any value here today, don't forget to like and follow. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and let's keep our minds on what helps us love ourselves and each other a little bit better every day.